again. Want to thank the board and the museum for inviting me to talk. It's nice to see so many history nerds here. My background is I work as a librarian at Brandon University. I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian at Brandon University. My job is to try and make more information open access and also support anything to do with bringing knowledge forward. My background beyond library sciences, I did an undergrad in history. And so Liam said, well, would you like to nerd out in front of a bunch of people? and I said, sure, I will do one. So the purpose of this talk today is it's about finding historical resources. And as I thought about it, I thought there's two important things that you need to talk about. You need to talk about what do people need to understand when they're digging through historical resources, and then how to dig through them. How do you go about finding materials and doing it without going through what Google would be $1 million or a million results sort of thing, okay? So there's different tools that you can use. As I said, I'm working at the Brandon University Library, and the library has a mandate to support study and research at our institution. We have many different disciplines, including history, so we collect materials related to that as well, and we gather and we preserve those records. We also have an archive, and the archive's mandate is to collect documentation related to the institution and to the region as well. They will collect primary sources, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them. The collection that an academic library will have is going to largely consist of materials that are scrutinized for accuracy or reliability based upon did they document the way they've done their studies, are they citing things, that sort of stuff. We also in the library try to let others know through some guides, and I'll show you one, what else is out there. Libraries and cultural institutions like museums, archives, we do a lot of work collaboratively. We have consortia that we work with, and sometimes one of our partners is putting up a great digital collection, and I'll say, oh, I want people to know about it here. And the final thing I want you to know about Brandon University is if you're a resident of Brandon, you can get a community borrower's card. Some of the stuff I'm going to show you today is open access, some of it isn't. But if you come into the university library, you can actually use our digital resources on campus. And this is all because of licensing restrictions with vendors and publishers. Historiography. I'm going to start a little bit about talking about the types of materials that are used. The first one I want to talk about are primary sources. And these are anything that was recorded near or at the time of a historical event or by somebody who witnessed it, okay? They can be anything from newsreel footage, diaries, personal notes, correspondence, all these types of things. Interviews, newspapers are a really big one. They're usually the first record of an event in history. Now, another thing that you need to know when you're doing history is I'm going to read something, and it's by the person who witnessed it. That person will have a personal opinion or a bias, okay? All of us do, all of us do. So you need to be able to understand not only what that person's perspective is, but you need to be able to look, is there other information? Is there a context to which this person's ideas are being placed? So you need to contextualize. Now, primary sources, these are the type of institutions you'll generally find them in, okay? Archives, collect, preserve, make accessible, and preserve historical resources. Generally, they're donated to them. Sometimes they go out and locate them. The archives can be more general in purpose, or it can be about a specific type of collection that they're looking for. Let's say, just for the sake of example, that you want to have an archive dealing with agriculture in Western Canada. You would look for documents supporting that. Our archives, again, as I said before, it's more institutional and local. So primary sources, archives, but libraries also have primary sources, usually in the form of books. There are things that are source books that contain relevant documents from different periods, and we have diaries, we have all kinds of types of material in these books. We also have access to the physical books that are secondary sources that we're just about to talk about. That's another, next slide. We purchase access to online digital collections, and they can be either primary or secondary. And we make available government documents, newspapers. Again, these are primary sources. Museums, we're in one today, and they make available artifacts, and they can also contain important documents like letters. What did women, I will do a search on that in a little bit, think at the time of settlement in Western Canada. You know, maybe some of the letters that women would write would provide a reflection of that. And finally, the other place that you might get this information is personal collections. People collect all kinds of interesting and quirky things over the years, and often these get donated. And while you and I might think, oh, geez, what the heck is my husband doing now? Well, a sociologist might find that very useful in the future as a reflection of the ideas or an issue. So that's where you'll find some primary sources. Now, secondary sources, they're primarily found in libraries. And these are things where somebody has a topic, they've gone through a lot of primary sources and secondary sources, and they're providing us with an interpretation of the past, okay? We have many in our library. We have books, we have government documents, we have articles, reports, documentaries, like anything that reflects that interpretation, okay? Now, the reliable ones are going to include a listing of their resources, that bibliography. So you can go back and make sure that, yes, this was what the author said. And it'll also provide you with information about the author, so you can assess their credibility, what kind of angle they're coming at something from. Again, just like everything, all the primary sources, you'll also be looking for the bias. And it's important to understand that anytime a human being puts word to paper, there's going to be some interpretation, okay? It is. We're all individuals. So when we talk about things that are secondary sources, I want to talk about a few things that we should always understand when we're going through these things. First of all, conclusions are usually based on the best information available at a given time, okay? So something that was written in 1950, and science has demonstrated that there's a new way of looking at a situation, is going to become dated, okay? It doesn't mean that the original author was malintended. They provided that conclusion at that time, okay? But they can change as new information becomes available. I was talking a little earlier how historians just absolutely loved it when the Mackenzie King records were made available. Honey, he had mommy issues. But it's not something that anyone would have thought of before. Next, the conclusions can also change as new researchers do the research, and their social norms are different from past social norms, okay? They may be biased because of location. Do people often think about that? No. But World War II, what is a German person going to think of the war versus someone in the United States, France, all these other areas? They may have personal biases because of what they saw and what they believed and what they were told. Okay? And again, the geography can play a factor because different social norms in different societies. Okay? And finally, conclusions can change if a source is discovered to have a conflict of interest. Well, we just saw that in the United States. They were talking about impeaching Biden. And then the person that they were saying was their source for all this was just charged with lying to the FBI. So can you believe that as your source? Well, new information became available, and no. So your conclusions have to change. Online resources. Okay, so the same criteria that we talked about when we're looking for historical resources and assessing primary and secondary systems have to be applied to our online resources that we use, okay? So who created it? Was some anonymous poster responsible for it? Does somebody who does a lot of research in this field and has credentials in this field, did they produce it? Was this someone who was a witness to history? Who does it matters. And like I said, what are their credentials? What are their biases? Are they providing a first-hand account? Is it supported by additional evidence from people at the time? When was it created? At the time it was created, were there different accounts? Okay? How would that same thing be viewed today? And why would it be viewed the same or differently? What additional resources do you need to better understand when you're doing a historical essay? Well, understand what ideas prevailed at the time, who held power, what were the economic circumstances, what were the societal norms, whose norms were those norms in transition? What was the physical environment at the time? Were people under stress? Was there famine? Was there disease? Those sorts of things. That also can color what's happening at a time. Now, when you start looking for stuff to provide you with information, you're going to look for books or articles, those secondary sources. And an encyclopedia is also a great one. It gives you sort of an introduction to what was going on at the time, okay? So now that we have sort of an idea of the key themes, we want to talk about getting started with your research. And when we do information literacy at the library, one of the first things we talk about is tell students to write out your assignment in a sentence or a paragraph, and then start underlying the key things. So one might be, I want materials discussing the role of Indigenous peoples in the War of 1812. So I would need to think about Indigenous and War of 1812, so I underlined it. I'm writing a paper of the perceptions of women in Canada during a certain period of time. And again, I kind of am able to sort of highlight what do I need to understand in a resource, okay? So as I look at things like this term here, okay, I understand as a librarian that there are multiple terms that can be used to represent the same concept, okay? Indians, Indigenous, Native, Aboriginal, First Nations. And I can go into one database and it will be the preferred term, and another database it'll be another one, okay? So keep in mind that you may need more than one word to represent a concept, okay? Similarly for the second one, you could use women, female, girls, all of these sorts of different terms. Now, for the second one, or perceptions, you might think, okay, I need primary sources to do that research, okay? I need to find out what women were thinking at the time, so I need to get to those primary sources. Well, in our library, we have books and we have articles and stuff like that, but we also have books that contain those records. And you would do in our search things like the personal narratives, diaries, letters, correspondence, speeches, interviews, autobiographies, memoirs, oral histories. These would all give you sort of a perspective of that population. And then finally, you might need to include things like a time period, like the 19th century, or like the War of 1812. The terms can vary, but understanding, structuring things so that you understand all the things that you need information on. Next, identify potential resources, okay? The different types, okay. If you need something that gives you a really good comprehensive coverage, like the entire War of 1812, the book is your resource, okay? It's going to give you a big picture of what's going on. Now, if you want something specific about something like the War of 1812, like the Creek War or something like that, or information about an individual who took part in it, you may need to consult journal articles or periodical articles. Periodicals just our academic word for a magazine article, but a magazine article that's been scrutinized, okay? They're shorter, and so they're more focused. And if you have something that's focused, I always go back to a question I once had about a mining disaster in British Columbia in 1914 or something like that. No one's going to write an entire book about it, but someone may have enough information to write an article about that, okay? Newspaper articles, okay? They're great primary sources, and they're the first record of an event. And then, again, do you need someone who's giving you a first-hand account, okay? Now, if you want to start identifying where I'm going to find those, you need to start identifying what are the appropriate research tools. Now, I don't know if it's very visible for you from there, but I'm showing you two things. First of all, you can consult our database list right here, which lists all the databases that we have in our library. And it's going to tell you everything you need to know. It'll tell you what the database searches, the types of content, historical period, geographical coverage, the publication coverage by years, and that sort of thing. And then you can also go to our library guide, and again, I can show you that in a bit. And it does a lot of that gathering of databases and catalogs and all this other stuff. But it also provides lists of primary sources in Canada. So a lot of libraries put together collections. You may find something very useful, you know. Are you doing research on the Doukhobors? Well, there's a Doukhobor archive, okay? So that's the sort of thing you should know about. Another tool is our one-stop search in the library. Now, this thing has been designed to tell people what we have in our collection. We also import records for anything that's open access, okay? So it is like a Google, but for our materials. So they're more reliable resources to use for your information needs. It's not very visible from here, but when you search for things, you'll notice that we have a link to a digital item. It says available online. It'll be marked open access if it's open access. And if you need the physical item, we have the location and call number, and you would write that down and use it to navigate towards that resource in our library. The journals list, if you learn from your research that there's an article in the journal. The library also provides us a journals list, and it says all the journals we have in the library, what dates we have them for, all this. So when you look at your citation information, you can use this. And then finally, now that you've sort of narrowed down what tools you want to use, how do you use those tools effectively? So, first thing I want to teach you is phrase searching. You've all gone onto Google before, and you do a search, and up pops all this stuff. Well, one thing you need to know is that computers can be programmed to basically look for this word here and way over there, and both words are in it, so I'll pull it together. It's not necessarily looking for them as a phrase. But what computers do understand is if you put them in quotation marks, it'll look for those two words together. So if you're looking for stuff on the War of 1812, quotation mark, War of 1812, quotation mark, okay? That just helps narrow things down. Understand about field searching, okay? Another geeky librarian thing. But it's about how we organize the records. You know, we tell our record, we say, this record is about this title, this author, and the primary topic of this work is this, and this subject, okay? And you usually find these in databases and in our library's advanced search screen. And what it does is it allows you to take something like the War of 1812 and look for it as a subject. It's only going to be assigned that as a subject if that's a major part of the work. It's not something peripheral, it's a subject. So in our geeky library world, we assign subjects if it's a major part of the work. Okay? And again, it just saves you time by getting to the better stuff. Identify useful terminology. When we do a search, we bring up, typically if we find something that looks interesting, is we bring up the full record. And it will provide us with a lot of additional terms that we can use. So you go into it and you say, oh, okay, War of Tecumseh-Brock, the War of 1812. Okay, what are the subject headings? War of 1812, history, Canada history, War of 1812. Campaigns, Canada history, War of 1812, participation, First Nations. And because of the hypertext linking now, you could click on that subject heading and bring up all those other books that have been assigned that as well, okay? You'll see things like an abstract, which will give you this description. So you say, is it on topic or not on topic? When was it published, and by whom? And ask yourself, is that relevant? So open up that full record, and then you can start narrowing down what is actually being used in a specific database. Okay, this is usually the biggie that we like to teach people, and that's called Boolean searching, okay? I'm going to teach you about two operators, the OR operator and the AND operator. Now, remember when I said earlier that there are different words that can be represent the same concept, but you don't necessarily know when you go into each database which one they're using? Well, if you use what's known as the OR operator, and you can create a record set. You use a bracket and you say, on one end, and you say, I want you to find me anything on Indigenous or First Nations or Indians or Natives or Aboriginal. Close your bracket. And it will bring up any records that have that in its search. So you're covering all your bases when you do that, okay? And like I said, you need the brackets to make it work. That's what computers will understand. The AND operator uses to narrow things down. So you bring up all those terms with the Indigenous people, right? And then you say, and I only want you to bring it up if I also see War of 1812 in it. So it narrows that record set down. So hypothetically, you might, with that first broad search, get 50,000 records. You might get, with War of 1812, 20,000 records. But when you combine those, maybe you get only 300 records. Okay? You're getting what you want, you're focusing it, and you're covering all your bases when you do these types of searches. And finally, I want to say, when you're using these databases, use what's called limiters. Anybody who's searched on a site like the Bay online will have seen limiters being used in terms of home or kitchen, and what kind of things in the kitchen do you want to see. Well, libraries do the same thing, and databases do the same thing. So, for example, in our library catalog, we have availability. Is it available physically in the library? Is it available online? Is it open access? That sort of thing. You can limit that way. When was it created? What were the subjects? American History and Life, which we're going to go into. This is really cool. You can narrow by historical period, okay? And just use that as a way of narrowing things down. What about Canadiana? That's another one. You can limit by languages. You can limit it by collections to newspapers, whatever. And I'll also show you iPortal, and that's the Indigenous Studies portal. And it's designed, it collects materials related to Indigenous peoples in North America. And it has some really neat features. It'll let you limit by open access. Is it a primary source or not? The type of resource, the subjects, all these different things. So when you do a search and there's a lot of records, look around for the limiters. And they're usually on the left, okay? And you can start narrowing it down to what you actually need. Okay. So once you do your search, you're going to need to locate the record. And to do that, you're going to need to understand some of the elements of a bibliographic record. This is a book record. And of course, you got the title of it, the author, who published it, year. And this is the call number and location. That is the information you need to locate it in our library. Our library uses something called Library of Congress, which is a bit different than the public libraries. It has letters and numbers. And it just, because academic institutions will have collections that can get pretty specific in terms of the niche work that's being done. And you need more flexibility in terms of narrowing. Okay? Here's an article, okay? As I said before, if there's full text, the database will say it's available in full text. You can click on the link, bring it up. If you don't see that, but you want to know if the library has it, or if you've got a record from a bibliography of your own, you can come into our journals list and enter in the title of the journal. And journals, being a magazine, will come out multiple times a year, okay? So you can't just enter in the title, because there's a lot of stuff that comes out of the North Dakota Quarterly. You have to know the year, the volume, the issue number, and the page number in order to locate it, okay? And you're not walking into the library and looking at, oh, no, it's this issue that I need to go to. Oh my God. So, I've also listed in this presentation good places to start searching. So why don't we go in and see some examples. Like, I want to show you how all these things apply when you're actually doing a search, okay? So this is the search. It goes off and presents you with a results list. You'll notice right here, it's got articles in it. Asks you, do you want something that's available in the library, in peer-reviewed journals? What type of item do you want? Do you just want books? You can click on that. From what date do you want it? Do you want it limited by subject? All these sorts of things. So let's just start with books, okay? Here's a listing of all the books. We've kind of Amazonized it over the years, and now it looks more cleaner than it used to in these old text-based ones. But you'll notice it's got that call number, and it's got that online access, Aboriginal Fur Trade Histories. Oopsie. And it's available online in our Indigenous Curriculum Collection. Let me see. So this will be a book about the interaction between the fur traders and Indigenous people in North America, including women, which we had as one of our concepts. Go into these result lists, and you can say through this, you can tweak your results. Do you want only things in English, for example? You can narrow it down that way. Things about the history of. Oh, that's advanced search. You'll notice with fur trade, with here, this is that advanced search screen I said. I can tell it only bring it up if these words occur as a subject. I can tell it, I want to get rid of the word women. I can enter the word woman here. And I can tell it only bring it up if fur trade is the subject, and then do a search. So you can get really, really specific from this advanced search screen, okay, about what you want. Okay, so you're going to get a different number of results. These are really nice. It does get a little persnickety. You may need to redo it as a book. Before we had about 80 books, but by telling it I want fur trade as a subject, it narrowed it down to 50 books. Okay, and you've said only bring it up if it has women. But what would happen if we went back up to the advanced search and said, okay, we only want to see it if the book is, about women specifically and the fur trade specifically. Tell it to search and tell it to get the books. And now it's down to 29, okay? So you're getting more and more and more specific using those field operators in that, okay? So that's one way of using our one-stop search. But there's another thing, and that is, I told you that we have materials in there. These are the secondary sources, but we can also get the primary sources. Now, I'm just going to go back into this form here, and I've got a list of all the different types of primary search terms. Now we want to see about books that have the secondary sources in it. I'm going to paste that in. And I've done that whole big search with the OR operators and the brackets around it, okay? If I just want to start with that, delete women. Okay. And the field is limited to the subject, but let's just do this as a search for starters. Okay. It says there's 3,000 items, no, 2.4 million items. I'm going to make sure we narrow that down and now add women. Okay, and we'll do a search. Now we're down to 94,000. I'm going to add a new line. We only want women in Canada. Okay. And then we tell it to search. Okay. Now it's saying we've got 4,000 records. And I can even go in here and say, yeah. Make sure I'm just getting the books, 224. And now I've got a list of diaries, etc., by women in Canada that you can get access to through our library. Again, some are available online, some are available physically. You're going to just have to keep track of which are which. Okay, we're going to do one on Indigenous people and the War of 1812 here. So I'm going to copy these terms that we had before. Paste, and then just type in War of 1812. So we're just going to do a simple one. We haven't limited by field yet. Okay, so it's given us 320 results, which is pretty good, actually. It's not too bad, but I can tell it. I also want to see these as a subject. Search about, oops, it doesn't select that. We had 320 before, now we have 103. Again, you can go through these records. Upper Canada officers, Braves, Ojibwe resistance.
How many hours would this have taken before we had these relational databases to access?
I'll give you an example. We have one.
For instance, to get this up here, this would, because I'm looking at the historical perspective, consider this a talk on historical research. Well, let's do this recursively. Prior to the 1990s, these things didn't exist. They weren't there, because this is a relational database which allows you to search it in the manner. But I think that the technological change in the fact that you, in like that, have got things up on this screen under difficult circumstances, right? It's very difficult to type standing up. I can tell you that from teaching in class. Is that the advances in the ability to get hold of information is absolutely incredible. And I wonder how long prior to this would it have taken to have got that list together?
I'll give you a little snippet, because from here we can actually tell people if we don't have it in the collection to interlibrary loan it, and that's all automated now because we can use this information and pull it into another database. We had a history prof at our university tell us one day after we had, it was a little bit after we just automated the ILL process so that we could pull that information from the record into the ILL system. But he had just placed all the ILLs he needed for his research in the summer, and it took him a morning, and that it would have taken him a week prior to this. So it's really speeding that up.
But it's not only just finding out what books you want to actually access before you even make the interlibrary loan.
Yeah.
So so the point I'm making is that prior to this, people made journeys to libraries in very exotic places and had wonderful dinners in the evening after they'd gone through their research. And actually being a historian was quite a wonderful life, right? And it was to preserve the elites of our culture. And now this, sadly, has taken away that way of life. Well, what's also going to happen here is that I'm a Luddite at heart, even though I've worked in technology all my life, is that what you're doing here is data mining, right? That's essentially what you're doing. All of this process, very quickly, I believe, is going to be exactly almost 200 years since the Luddites broke the looms, right? All of this is going to be automatable. And that your research, your historical research, will be able to be done like that, not just the finding of the sources, but the interpretation of the sources. And AI is getting to that point. And I think the structure of our world is going to change. And this is why I think we need to record this talk, because this is a museum and I think an oral history would be very in place.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to be doing this.
Could I just mention, there was a big change too. Now, in a 20-page historical article, you will have maybe 200 footnotes. And in the past, you might have 49. But now there'll be 8 to 10 footnotes for every page. Yeah. And publishers will object if there isn't. They absolutely insist on this much documentation now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to speak to that from a student's point of view.
Yeah.
In days of yore, when I was a student doing a master's program, it took me months of sitting and sweating in the library doing this kind of thing while the profs were traveling around going to exotic places.
Hey, it's a good life. It's a good life. And then computer scientists spoilt it.
They were fun, like, I know somebody at the university, and every 2 years, her job is to go to England to dig through the British Library to get through their documents.
Not anymore, they won't, because the British Library has been infected by ransomware. I was there this summer.
I know they have.
Yeah.
I think they're back up, though.
Yeah.
I remember that. That was just nasty. So,
God, the elite world being attacked from outside is terrible.
yes, I know.
Probably.
Oh, well. So, I guess if there's no more questions, I'll just do a few more quick little searches and.
Well, I just think that we should break the loons now. Well, it was 1820 they did it, so we might.
To some extent, this is standardizing knowledge.
Yeah, well.
But how are you going to break the AI when the AI talks to your toaster and knows what you're up to?
No, I know. Well, to use a pun, frankly, I think we're toast.
Oh,
And I actually think, look, I worked all my life in computer science. I'm a technology guy. That's where I came from. But I think this type of work is part of the fabric of life that makes life interesting.
yes, it is.
That gives people passions. That they do wonderful things. That are creative. That they feel a sense of achievement over. And yet, I think we're taking it away with much of the technology.
I think where, and again, my background is history, you always come back to is human beings. And economics is another one, okay? Why are companies doing this? To make money, okay? How are you going to make money when you're not paying people to do things? You know, ultimately you may have to find a way of redoing your whole economy so people have leisure time, but they can do these things on their own. Or maybe you say, okay, there's something that's just not worth the price. But ultimately, in history, people don't have the resources they need to do what they need to do. You get revolution. So, you know, a little cautionary tale. Okay, so we did this search. We've got some results. We've narrowed it down to this. What else can we do? We can narrow it by subject, by language. And I told you that you can also narrow it down by decades and years. Where is that? Here. Oh. We're in the advanced search, aren't we?
Yep.
Where are the filters? Limit to. Yeah. No, that's publishing date. I'm thinking there's a way to limit it by year. Maybe that's in historical abstracts. But anyways, this is where you go when you're wanting to do your research. And it will index the articles, it'll index book chapters, that sort of thing. And it's already focused in North America, so it's again narrowing things down. Okay, so we did that. I think we can shut this, well, maybe I'll leave it open. I want to show you this, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit about, I told you before about our guides. I and a bunch of other librarians in North America and Canada put together guides that say, what are the primary sources that have been developed? Where are these collections and that sort of stuff? So you'll notice here I put together some good things for Manitoba history. Some general digital collections, usually these are by universities that have developed these big digital libraries. Documents, these are the collections that are available. I've indicated if they're open access, it's got that little or the little unlock as a symbol. Newspapers. I'm just astounded by how much digitization has occurred with newspapers across Canada. You really, you go to the different provinces and this work has been done. And these things have been made openly available. The only time that it won't be made openly available if it's still under copyright by a publisher. But all this old historical stuff is there. Now, you can go into this thing and play around with the different types of resources. I've got some here, let's say, by gender and sexuality. These are the archives and that sort of stuff that will have information on that topic. But the one I want to show you about today is a big comprehensive one. Let's do this instead. And that is Canadiana, okay? For those of you old enough to remember, Canadiana, it was a they had taken all of these records and they put them onto microfilm, and now they've taken them from microfilm and they're putting them into digital. And the Canadian Research Knowledge Network has licensed it on behalf of all Canadians. So it's openly available, you can use it and look for all kinds of stuff. Now maybe I should just remember what we were going to look for. On Canadian. Okay. Northwest Passage. Let's do a search on the Northwest Passage. And this is all these old primary stuff. Discovery of the Northwest Passage.
Ronnie Franklin had this.
Yeah. Well, and we can add Franklin. And Franklin. Did you ever remember when Harper went up north to try to discover this? Apparently, some of the indigenous people up there already knew where the ship had sank. But no one ever asked them. Oh, okay, so here's some life of John Franklin in the Northwest Passage. And the first thing will be the picture of the microfilm.
You guys know just last.
Oh, did I? Okay. From the very beginning. And let's see if I can navigate through here. Okay. And it's this old book about him. Pictures. And of course, this has been was put into microfilm and then digitized from the microfilm. Okay, but there's government documents about the search that went on, and they started looking for it. All kinds of material available through Canadiana. Okay, so you should know about it as one of the great resources you can use. Okay. And I think that's some of the main ones that I've talked about, but I'll go back to that guide. Where's our Canadian history guide?
Thank you.
Oh, did I have it? Yeah, there, that's where I got it from. Okay, back. If I can find the arrow. Okay. Library and Archives Canada. Anyone who does genealogy will be searching Library and Archives Canada. Here's a really neat one. Manitoba Archival Information Network. This indexes what different archives in Manitoba have in their collections. Some of them have been digitized, made available, and this is sort of a consortium of archivists that went with this one system, and they're uploading the content into it. Okay. Our world. This is broader, it's more world, but it's, I felt the need to let you know. The University of Manitoba has made available to all Manitobans their primary source collection from Gale called Our World. And it's materials largely related to around, pre-1800 and that sort of stuff, or into the 1800s. But it may also give you some information on the colonial perspective of things and what was happening in Britain and that sort of stuff. Okay? So I'm going to let you guys, if and when you want to, go in and sort of see what is it that's useful for me, because I could be here all week. I want to thank everybody for showing up, and it's really been great. Thank you. And thank you for the questions.